Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. Congo loves humanity. He molded the gems into how he sees a better human society. He creates a school grounded in never-ending learning and development as the gems consistently fill their roles. The gems care for the school as their home, and do their best to create an environment reminiscent of human life by Congo's instruction. They mold furniture to mimic the design of ancient human interiors. They call those younger than them child, despite having no knowledge of the actual concept. They do not value creative literature or recording the past because there's no one to pass that information to. The strict set of customs in the gem society that value sameness is Congo's will to preserve a peaceful version of human society. However, the gems will never graduate and constantly be in the role of a student. Congo teaches the gems to imitate human life as best they can, despite the gems having no knowledge of why it is set up this way. Congo loves humanity. Congo loves the gems. But the gems aren't human. The gems don't live like humans. They don't sense the world like humans. They don't eat like humans. They don't get sick like humans. And they don't die like humans. The gems do not utilize the mimics of human society Congo commands them to build, due to their bodies being made out of heavy stone. The gems rarely record information because they are immortal and almost always give information orally. The gems are unable to form deeper bonds with one another due to the diversities in physical makeup and lack of empathy in their society. The gems fail in every aspect to be human, except for phosphophylite. In Life and Culture of Y3579203181277, or what I like to call the lore book, it talks about how the Earth is completely different from what us as the audience would know. We forget that the gems are extremely heavy, made out of pure rock. Luckily, the Earth's gravitational pull is also weaker from losing 6 chunks. This allows the gems, despite their lack of organic human features, to mimic a similar posture for human society, but ultimately, the lore book points out how they fail at it. Congo tries to reinforce things that humanity values, but because of the striking differences between the gems and humans, they are unable to fully understand the purposes of these items. For instance, chairs. The lore book states the gravitational pull of Y3579203181277 can be considered about 1/3 of its former strength. From before the meteor impact splintered into several satellites, even so, constructing a chair that can support the gems' heavy bodies is a source of great mental stress to the woodworker gems. Due to the limited supply of lumber, the majority of chairs are built with 3 legs, as small as possible. Generally, they are used during short rest periods so that the gems don't get dirty or scratched by the floor. It's rare that a gem will sit down for an extended length of time. The frequency of repairs is high, so it cannot be said that using chairs is particularly logical. However, it is theorized that recreating the lifestyle of an ancient creatures holds some importance to the gems, and the furniture's purpose is more decorative in nature. One of our most eccentric scholars insists that the high number of 3-legged chairs is reminiscent of elderly people from the ancient race. Figure A depicts the earliest, most basic stool crafted from a tree root, miraculously still in one piece. It's not suitable for carrying a lot of weight. Figure B shows the most commonly used chair. While it's used as a seat, it also often used to hold cloves or as a weapon stand. Figure C is a unique model reusing the fork of a tree as the legs. The seat has cloth cover cushions filled with dried grass. It's used after damage repairs. Figure D shows a high chair with a number of legs added into the free spaces. As most gems are busy working at their post, it's more of an interior decorating element. Additionally, before going to bed, the majority of gems enjoy conversation with one another, but generally put out cushions to sit on the floor at this time. This chair is rarely used. Figure E is a bench seen in the strategy room. It's temporarily used by gems on standby. There are few variations in desks compared to chairs, and there are less of them present as well. Figure F shows the basic 2-legged design. There's also a model with a drawer, figure G, for holding small items. Figure H is a footstool. Figure I is a step ladder, used to reach items on high shelves in the medical room, as well as board up the windows in the hibernation chamber. One must be extremely careful with how they shift their weight, and those who are not used to using it often fall off when they try. It wasn't until I thought about this for quite some time that I realized that Foss is the only character seen using chairs correctly, which is really funny, because Foss is the only one who becomes human in the end, in the eyes of the story. So I saw this as really niche foreshadowing for the fact that Foss will one day be more human, and the fact that they already are more human than the other gems by the beginning of the series. In fact, the gems don't need to use chairs because they rarely get tired, I believe, since their bodies don't have muscles or strenuous things that they have to, take a rest. They can stand for pretty much as long as they need to, as long as they have light energy, I presume, because that's how their body works. And so, like the lore book says, chairs aren't really necessary and they're mainly decorative. However, we see Foss utilize the chairs all the time. And Foss is the only character really seen using chairs other than 2 times. I have combed through the entire manga and to check if Foss is the only one who ever sits down. And they aren't the only ones who ever sit down, but on the Earth, there's only 2 cases where where a gem is actually 3, if you count a character in the background. And if you don't count, anyway, there's a few other cases, but Foss is the main gem that you see sitting down, and it makes sense because we follow Foss throughout the story, but it says that these chairs are rarely used, and we see Foss sitting in them all the time. So that just tells you 2 things about Foss. It tells you that Foss doesn't have a job, because they're not busy, because it's saying that the gems are usually too busy to sit down and rest. And it also tells us that Foss is better able to mimic humanity than all the other gems, because Foss knows how to use a chair and uses a chair quite often. And it's possibly because of their physical makeup and their lack of hardness that they're lighter, and so that they can use these chairs without breaking them and actually sit and utilize them, unlike the other gems who are too heavy and will end up breaking the chair if they sit on it for an extended period of time. With this, we can see that Foss better displays humanity, even in just the small things, like using chairs often. That sets them apart from other gems. And I believe that Congo actually notices this fact, and as Foss becomes more human throughout the story, Congo is further reminded of humanity. And I believe that the reason why Congo cares so much for Foss and allows Foss so much freedom and doesn't berate Foss as much is because he sees more humanity in Foss than the other gems, even at the beginning of the story. And by the end of the story, I believe Foss is supposed to remind Congo of Dr. Ayumu, and who is the most important human to Congo. And I believe that's why Congo follows what Foss says. And the whole story is Foss getting closer to humanity, and it's really interesting to see that even at the beginning of the story, there's hints that Foss is even more human than the other characters. And it's because of Foss's empathy that the whole story starts. And that is a clear defining thing that separates Foss from the rest of the gems, is that Foss is a lot more empathetic than the other gems, and that is their desire to help the other gems who most of the gems have just ignored or not really aided in their situation because they don't understand the other gems, but Foss does. And it's these little things at the beginning of the story that causes Foss's journey. And it's really cool to see how even such a small thing as Foss being able to use chairs more normally than the other gems indicates a difference in Foss that ignites the story. And now we're going to go through almost every time we see Foss sitting in a chair and a few of the other gems just to get an indication of what I'm saying and how this is foreshadowing for the story and elevates the fact about Foss. So this is the first time we ever see Foss sitting down. And it's when they're talking about all the jobs that Foss has tried to do. I think that the crafting one, it looks like Foss is even trying to make a chair and failing. I'm not sure, because, the images are so simplistic. But we see that Foss is sitting down during the strategy room and sitting down during the tailoring one, and they're using the, most common chair, while the other gems around them are standing. And then this is the first page of Chapter 2, where Foss is actually utilizing one of the chairs in the figure, which they're all listed, but here. And just a reminder of what it says, Figure D shows a high chair with a number of legs added into the free spaces. As most of the gems are busy working at their posts, it's more of an interior decorating element. Additionally, before going to bed, the majority of gems, enjoy conversation with one another, but generally pull out cushions to sit on the floor at this time. This chair is rarely used. I remember reading that, and I was, looking at the chair, and I was like, Foss sits in this chair all the time, or at least at the first chapter 2, we see Foss using it. And like it says, it's mainly used for decoration, yet we see Foss constantly come back to this location and sit down and work, or just think, or just sit down. And it's funny, because I think this is the chair that we see them at a lot of the time, and it says this chair is rarely used. That means that Foss is probably the only one who really uses this chair. We never, like, ever see another gem use this chair, or this type of chair. We see other gems use only the most common chair twice. And the main chair that we see other gems use is the big bench. But we only see that when Foss is also sitting on the big bench. And usually Foss is the one sitting down and the characters are talking to them. So it's very interesting. And like I said, this shows two things. Foss isn't very busy, because it says that that like most of the gems do not really use chairs because they're so busy, and it shows that Foss is able to use the chairs because they don't cause the chair to break, because we know that Foss would try to minimize like causing problems, so the fact that they sit on chairs all the time shows that they can sit on them without breaking. So here's like another shot of, Foss sitting on the chair. And then we have this shot where Foss is sitting on this is the most common chair that is utilized. And again, like, this is because Foss like can't use their legs yet because they just got them right. And it's interesting how Foss is usually lower in the frame. I talk about this in my analysis videos, but Foss is usually lower in the frame. They're always like resting, actually. They're always flopping down on the floor, or, just sitting down, or getting tired and falling down, which isn't common for the other gems. And again, it shows like how they're more human and how their personality is a lot different from the other gems. And the fact that like they get tired and get mentally exhausted to the point where they need to sit on the chair, and in them like finally standing up and no longer have to use the chair is kind of them being like trying to be equal to the gems, or like not needing it as much, but they still end up like falling down and stuff like that. And so here's the two other times where we see characters sitting on the chair. So we see with Obsidian, yeah, this is Obsidian, and you can see that the chair that Obsidian is sitting on is tattered. Like, it's clearly been put together several times because of the detail of the wornness on the legs, and that tells us that Obsidian isn't fit to like sit on chairs that much, because it looks like it needs to be repaired a lot, whereas all the chairs that Foss sits in are completely fine. And here we have a picture of Foss just like lying on a chair, and like again, all the other characters are walking around, standing, doing their job, and Foss is the only one really resting and sitting down, just to show like their difference between the other gems. I pulled out this photo because, again, it shows how, like, whenever, like, Foss gets actually physically exhausted, whereas we don't see that as much with the other gems, and Foss actually, like, falls down. And I believe this is mental exhaustion, too, because, in my over-analysis videos, I often say that, like, Foss's mental state is reflected in them physically, and them being mentally exhausted shows up with them physically, like, falling down, or physically like wanting to sit, and like it shows that a more human side to them, or of them getting tired and exhausted, and something that's really different. So here we have Alex sitting with Foss, but it's because Foss isn't sitting down and Alex is drawing, but like it sees that like the gem, but even in this image, Alex isn't really using a chair how we would use a chair, right? Like Alex is kind of using it as if it's more of an extended surface, and they're like, sitting on their like legs, but Foss is actually the only one in this frame actually utilizing a chair how we would utilize a chair. We as in we're humans, obviously. And here, like, figure E is a bench scene in the strategy room. It's temporarily used by gems on standby. And see how it phrases this as if it's a temporary thing. So Foss, like, sitting on here all the time whenever they're, exhausted, like, it's shown that, like, not a lot of the gems use it, but Foss is the one who actually utilizes it that often. And here is Foss sitting with Zircon and having a conversation, but they're not sitting on a chair, they're sitting on the stairs, And so it's like another thing of like, whenever Foss is with like another character, if they're sitting down, usually it's also the characters sitting down to be like Foss or to be near Foss. Because I bet that, like, they could have this conversation sitting up, but because, like, this was when Foster's exhausted and Zircon comes to join them, that's the only reason they sit down next to them. And now here is, like, the only time we see this chair used, which is, like, a regular, like, school chair. And, of course, it's when Congo is teaching Foss. And I believe, like, this is also supposed to show that, like, all the gems probably know how to use a chair, right? Or Congo was like, oh, yeah, you sit down, put both of your legs on the ground and stuff like that. But it's not really seen by the other gems except for Foss. And this also just, like, I'm like, it's Foss sitting. Wow. So I brought this up because, like, this is when Alex is training Foss. And here, they're both sitting on the ground. They're both sitting on cushions. And we see that throughout the story, like, whenever they are in the break room. And then I have this one with Ghost and Foss, because here Ghost and Foss are talking. And we see that there's chairs in this room. Like, there's actual chairs. And another thing is it states that it needs to make the chairs small, because they don't have that many materials. And they also take a lot of care in matching up the grain to mimic that they cut it from a bigger tree. But in the society that they have right now, the trees are very thin. So they mimic that aspect as if they were in a world where humans once lived. So it's very interesting to see that. Anyway, I just like another small detail is that there's all these chairs here, and Ghost doesn't sit on the chairs, Ghost sits on the table, probably because it's more, like, fitting for their weight or something like that, or it's probably easier for them to use. And I realized this looking back, because I was like, there are chairs here, Ghost, and Ghost decides to sit on the table because that just works better for them, and they don't they don't mimic humanity in that way where they will that. And here's an example of a chair being used as a weapon stand too, because it said that in the book as well, and we have a weapon resting on the chairs. That's probably Ghost. Actually, no, Ghost doesn't use a sword. That's probably Foss's weapon, maybe. And again, like, there's clearly chairs here, and Ghost decides to sit on the table, and it just shows the difference. So here is, I brought this image up because we see that there's, I think that's Nephite, based on the hair, probably. I don't know. But there's a gem sitting here on the bench, but, again, they're not sitting on it the right way. They're sitting on it on the edge, like, to be fair, sometimes, like, we sit on chairs weirdly, not how it's intended, but, it just shows that it's also, like, a temporary space, because all these other gems here are not using the chairs. They're standing up and they're talking, and even though there's chairs there, they don't use them, and we even see more gems in the background not using it. So here's a shot of the room that, I believe this is a shot of when they're fighting and they see this room, and this is, of course, Congo and Ayumu's, like, room where they talk later. We see that there's a chair in this corner that mimics one of the chairs that, actually is never seen sat on in the series. And so I believe that chair was made, just to mimic Congo's memory of seeing, Ayumu sit in one of these chairs, and it has 3 legs like all the other chairs. So this may be what Congo sees a chair as, because I thought it was kind of weird that we don't see many chairs with 4 legs, but yeah. And so here we have, this is Karen Gorm sitting on the chair, but again, like, when a chair is, even when another gem is sitting on a chair, like, all the other gems are standing around, and there's only 2 of them, and it just shows that, like, they don't really use these chairs that much. They're kind of just there. And again, they're there for, like, when they need repairs and stuff, because that's when they actually need to rest. But even then, usually they're repaired on a table. So chairs really aren't used that much. Here is actually, we finally made it to the moon, and Foss is sitting down across from Acmea. And this is, like, the first time Foss has ever sat in, like, a different thing. But, like, again, like, another thing is it shows that, like, since the Lunarians sit down all the time, I think it also shows them being closer to humanity than the gems. And it also signifies, like, one of the differences, because we rarely see the gems sit down, whereas we see the Lunarians sit down all the time. And I think it's just another contrast between the Lunarians and the gems that is really here's Foss sitting on a staircase, kind of like with Foss and Zircon before. And, like, the Lunarians are, like, completely more comfortable with sitting down. In fact, compared to Congo, who's always standing, Acmea is always sitting down in the scenes where Foss talks to him, or most of the scenes where Foss talks to them. And again, like, Foss just sits down all the time. And here's when Foss returns from the moon, they're even sitting down on chairs, like, in more of the frames. And again, the gems don't. Like, this shot of the gems, of Rutile standing here, and Foss in a chair. Okay, I brought this one up, because in this one, we see Jade sitting on a chair. And this is the only time I found another character besides Obsidian sitting in one of these chairs. And I just wanted to point that out for argument's sake. Okay, there's one other time where a gem is seen sitting in a chair, and this is for the strategy room. And of course, it's probably to get closer to see where they are in the strategy, but there isn't that many chairs around there. Okay, and then on the Moon Society, we see the gems get on more used chairs, but again, I think that's to distinguish the Lunarians from the gems, and it's also to show that maybe they're becoming more human, you know? And so here we see Paparacha sitting down. We see Acnea sitting down again to distinguish himself from Congo, who doesn't sit that often, because he doesn't need to, except he uses the stand to sit, which, yeah. And then it's not until the moon where we see more of the gems sit down, you know? We see Karen Gorm, like, sit down normally, too, because they're mimicking Lunarian society, who sits down a lot more. And then here we, you know, this is, like, one of the few times where Foss, well, like, this is one of the times where Foss is sitting across from someone and talking to them, like another gem, and, like, I saw through all those on Earth, like, that rarely happened with, like, two characters sitting down on chairs and talking to each other, but on the moon, it's quite common, you know? And here's Foss being all happy, and again, this is Foss sitting down, just every single time. I combed through the manga and found every single time Foss sits down because I was so fascinated. And again, the distinguish between Lunarian lifestyle and gem lifestyle in this, like, compared to the gems who all stand around, now all the gems sit down on the moon because it's just how the Lunarians have it. And here we see Daya, Amethyst, and Karen Gorm all sitting down and talking in contrast. And it shows how they've really implemented into Lunarian society and are more like Lunarians now. And I guess that also shows how Foss was more like a Lunarian, which Lunarians I'd say are closer to humans than the gems. From the beginning of the story, it could also be connected to that. So again, does this count as sitting? That's why I incorporated this photo in here. This is Foss crawling onto the seat. I was trying to compile every single time Foss sits down. Do you think this counts as sitting? That's why I put it in here. And again, this is just photos. Now, here's an interesting one. This is Foss is the only one sitting down when they go to take charge, for the, you know, battle, the civil war that's about to go on. And I just found that interesting. I actually added this in here after, because I was like, I saw this, I was rereading it, and I saw this, and I was like, wait, Foss is the only one sitting down here. This adds to my, like, theory that, like, Foss sitting down shows that they're more human, because the gems don't really sit down that much, or don't need to. And it also, again, it shows that Foss gets tired, and I think it's more of a mental exhaustion that's exhibited in Foss, and that's why they're seen sitting down more often, and, like, being lower in the frame, or constantly lying down, is because of, it relates to a mental exhaustion as well. That is displayed in them physically, and that's why they sit down a lot more often than the other gems. And it's not until all the gems become Lunarians that we really see them sit down more often. And same with Congo. This is the first time we've ever seen, like, Congo sit down. I think we might have seen him sit down, like, on a chair. I mean, we've seen Congo sit down before, I think, but not in a chair. So here is a shot of Congo with Ayuma, a human. I also didn't realize that the dog Shiro, probably why Hongo called him Shiro, to mimic what a dog is under the table. I, like, just realized that going through this, like, before recording, and I was like, how did I not notice that? There's all these small details, man. But a thing I want to note is that this chair that Congo is sitting on resembles the chair in figure A in the book, and it said that that was the first chair ever made. And it's a very simple chair, so it makes sense, but it mimics that type of chair that Congo's sitting on. So this is probably the chair that Congo most remembered and taught the gems to make first. And then Ayuma is sitting on the chair that we've rarely even seen in the show, and I don't think we've ever seen someone sit on it, kind of showing the, like, peak humanness, I guess. But it's interesting that it's exactly like a chair that Congo has told them to create. So it shows that Congo is trying to use his memories of humanity and living that through the gems, or getting the gems to mimic them. And that's also probably why a lot of the chairs are three-legged, is just because Ayumu, sorry. I keep saying Ayuma instead of Ayumu for sometimes, but, like, it's because the chairs are supposed to remember that, and, you know, like, how that is. And, of course, this whole thing is just to tell you that Foss mimics humanity better than any of the other characters in the series, And that, of course, is a huge part of Foss. And so it's just crazy looking back that even a small detail like a chair can show that Foss is more human than the other characters and develops to be more human. And I believe like this is a connection between like Foss being a recollection for Ayumu for Congo, and that's probably a whole separate video, but it's just crazy how even a small minute detail like a chair shows how Foss is different from the other characters and how Foss it has more humanity than the other characters. You just watched over a 20-minute video about fictional chairs. You're welcome.